You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air, the podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. I'm your host, Lisa Mueller, and today we have a very special guest, Kathi Vidal, former Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Kathi is now a partner at Winston Strawn LLP, where she continues to shape the future of intellectual property law and technology policy. Kathi has been at the forefront of shaping IP policy, expanding patent accessibility, and tackling some of the biggest challenges in innovation, including AI, diversity and inventorship, and the evolving role of universities in the tech ecosystem. In this episode, we'll explore how tech transfer professionals can navigate policy shifts, leverage the latest changes in patent law, and ensure their institutions stay competitive in a rapidly changing IP landscape. Welcome back to the podcast, Kathi, and happy Women's History Month.
Happy Women's History Month.
Well, so excited to see you again. This time, you're no longer at the PTO, but back in private practice. But I think you're a fantastic guest for this month. And I thought maybe we'd start with some background. You started in electrical engineering before you moved into law. So how did your technical background shape your understanding of patents and intellectual property?
It shaped it really because of my experiences. Certainly as a woman in the law, well, actually as a woman engineer, I experienced engineering differently than the guys. I was one of only 3 women in my engineering class. I was pretty much the only woman who worked on my teams at General Electric. And so I just saw things through a little bit of a different lens. I also knew what it was like to be an inventor. I was inventing in the AI space in the 1990s. So, really cutting edge stuff and knew all the things that inventors went through.
Yeah, you were definitely right there early for the time, for sure. And were there any earlier experiences? Maybe it was AI that, really hinted at your future in shaping IP policy?
I don't know if it was AI or not. I will say I'm always one who likes to look at a system and see if the system is working and if it can be improved. So, even when I was an engineer, I was always thinking about the broader picture in terms of the industry, in terms of the way the corporation worked. And so that to me probably had an impetus in me constantly thinking about how can I play a larger role? How can I have more impact? And really make a difference when it comes to the work that I'm doing.
So you mentioned your time at GE. How did that influence your approach with working with inventors?
As I mentioned, I was an inventor. I worked alongside a lot of other inventors, and it was all team efforts. And it influenced me in part because you have to think carefully about who you bring into that mix and what their backgrounds are, if you're going to get the best product. I also saw some of the struggles when it came to inventorship. So that influenced me to some extent. But I will say, Lisa, that one thing I was really careful about when I came in was not to think that I really needed to bring my background to bear, but more that gave me a lens through which I needed to then see other people's lenses. I needed to reach out and understand what other people were experiencing. So it was a nice starting point. But I feel like what really influenced my work was getting out there, listening, drawing a little on my own experiences in terms of what to ask people, but then really drawing on people's broader experiences.
Yeah, that's really a great approach. And so you were at GE for a while, and then eventually you transitioned from engineering to law. And how did that shift help you see the patent system from all these different perspectives that you just mentioned?
So I was at GE and GE transitioned itself. So it was Lockheed Martin by the time I left. I was there for 5 years. And, at some point, I love engineering. I love the work that I was doing. at some point, I was so deep into artificial intelligence that the learning curve wasn't as steep. And I like learning lots of different technologies. So when I decided to go to law school, it was in part because I didn't think the leadership roles I was playing were enough to keep me stimulated. The engineering part of it wasn't enough because, at that time AI was not moving as fast as it is today, and it wasn't as stimulating as learning different technologies or being on a steep curve when it comes to technology. So when I decided to go into the law, it was really to find a place where I could do the analytical work that I love, I could do the engineering work that I love, and then really take it from there. So when I think about the way I approach the work as a lawyer, it's really thinking about strategy and technology first. Certainly the law comes into that because you have to apply the law. But to me, it's all about the strategy and the technology.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about patent law is the strategy and the law and the technology and all those different pieces that you have to meld together. And then when you throw in jurisdictional components like practicing on a global scale, if you really love challenges and puzzles, it's a really great field to be in. I can completely agree with you on that.
And I think you can't miss the business component. A lot of times when people come to me, they've got a business problem. So I just spoke to somebody this week that's got a major issue. It invokes IP, but trying to think of it in terms of what's your legal solution to me isn't broad enough. Like I want to be a fixer. I want to say, okay, I know the IP law. Certainly we can use the courts. There's avenues that we can use, but let's think more broadly about how we can solve this in the way that's best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kathi, you've led IP practices across major law firms there at Winston, for example, and then at the USPTO. So how would you say those experiences compare when it comes to supporting innovators, startups, and universities, for example?
I saw that as being much different. Certainly the work that I did at the PTO was really to harness the potential of U.S. government to help innovators, to help entrepreneurs. And the team was aligned and right in step with everything that we did. We did a tremendous amount of work trying to get out there. Obviously, we were very involved with Autumn. Really wanted to make sure that we had close ties, close relationships. We're always listening both to the individuals and to the organizations such as Autumn that do a great job of harnessing the power of innovators and inventors and entrepreneurs. So from my perspective, the work I did at USPTO, although I was also leading many other aspects of the organization, because I was leading the organization, there was a big focus on supporting entrepreneurs. Now, the law firm life is a little different. I feel like a lot of the people I work with are much farther along in their journey when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship. I love that as well. I'm working on some major AI projects with some of the top AI engineers in the country. And I couldn't be more thrilled to just be rolling up my sleeves and working with inventors, working with innovators who are really moving the needle in a way that's going to have a major impact on the country.
Yeah, I would imagine for you, that must be a really fun project to work on.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It makes me get excited. I was excited at the PTO to get up at 2 or 3 every morning because we were moving the needle in such a positive way. And I'm super excited now to do it and just be there exploring AI, using it, talking to the people who are actually moving the needle in terms of its future.
Yeah, it's changing and evolving really rapidly. So I'm sure, given your personality and all that you like to do in the intersection of all these different areas that AI touches on, it's something that I'm sure really, really excites you.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, Kathi, is there a particular case or maybe policy decision from your career that you think significantly impacted how universities and research institutions protect and commercialize their innovations?
So, it's interesting, Lisa, because one thing that I've said time and time again is a lot of the major policy we moved is not the stuff that we posted on our website, because a lot of the policy was national or international in nature. So if you think about everything that was going on across U.S. government, everything that was going on internationally, what we did over the last 4 years is we protected U.S. innovation. You didn't see U.S. innovation going to other countries at no charge, right? We pushed back against forced tech transfer to the global South. Global South being South America, Africa, other countries, China. And so there was a push the entire time to work in forced tech transfer and other measures, either into international agreements or into other agreements. And that we did along with other aspects of U.S. government. It wasn't just a USPTO thing, but we were certainly the ones really pushing for an agenda that was pro innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to stick on your time at the PTO for a little bit here, because one of your priorities as the director was making the patent system more accessible. So I want to talk about some of the steps you took to improve the processes for university and tech transfer offices.
Absolutely. So I will say a couple things. One, universities and tech transfer offices were one of our top priorities. So certainly we were out there to support individual inventors throughout the entire country, right? They're part of our ecosystem. We need more of them. But as you know, most of the key fundamental research comes out of universities. And so we focused on that so much that I asked the deputy director, Derek Brent, to make that a major part of his portfolio, in addition to me working on it directly with him and with Autumn and other organizations. So we did put out a request for comment when it came to tech transfer. We were listening to those comments and thinking about how we could play a role. I will say that Autumn and universities are pretty well developed. We understood that pretty early on. So we didn't want to get in there and recreate the wheel in any way. We just wanted to be there to say, are there any gaps? Can we fill them? If we can't fill them, how can we play a role as a convener? Like, what role can we play to make sure that universities who aren't as well developed as other universities get together in some way so that all universities across the country, benefit from all this work, and our allies as well. Certainly we were focused on our allies. So a lot of the work we did was with that in mind. And then everything that we did was about innovation and U.S. innovation. And again, supporting our allies. And so to me, every single policy we adopted supported the work of universities. And I'll just give you one example: changing the communications we had with inventors. So when inventors applied for a U.S. patent, not just giving them a first communication that essentially says, no, you're rejected. Changing that communication so that we say, welcome to the innovation ecosystem. You can now use patent pending. Here's all the resources that are available so that we can support you on your journey. And the patent examiners want you to get a patent. They just want it to be a strong patent. So was that focused only on universities? No. Did it benefit universities? I'm sure it did, as some people in universities were applying for patents and then persisted because they received encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. That letter that came, I know a lot of small clients, startups would get that. And I think it set the tone the right way rather than the first thing being a rejection. And I think it definitely kind of changed the mindset of how smaller inventors and smaller startups viewed working with the patent office from a much more friendly perspective. So I definitely think that was a great program, and look forward to that continuing. And I wanted to go back. You mentioned Derek Brent, and he really was a great advocate working with Autumn. He was at the annual meeting last year and very much working collaboratively with the organization, particularly, as you mentioned, the Emerging Research Institution program, trying to get universities who maybe were just beginning on their tech transfer journey or needed assistance in their tech transfer journey, the assistance that they needed, both from Autumn and the USPTO. It's a great program.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to talk about the patent bar, because one of the things you also did during your time at the PTO was expand the patent bar to include more professionals from diverse backgrounds. How do you think tech transfer professionals can take advantage of some of these changes?
And, it's interesting because it did have that effect, right? It did allow more people from diverse backgrounds to be part of the patent bar. But everything we did, and I think this is really important given what we're seeing now, everything that we did was to lift everybody, right? So what we did was we expanded the bars in a way that did not decrease the quality at all, but it got rid of what I would consider fake barriers, barriers that had no purpose. So, and the best example of that is design patents. Do you really need a PhD in biology to file a design patent on a chair? it just wasn't matched up correctly. So when I think about tech transfer offices, certainly the ability to be admitted to the patent bar now makes more sense than it did before we got into office. And so I think they benefit from that in a couple ways. One, it does expand the opportunities for those who want to be a member of the bar, who want to better understand the work at the USPTO. It also offers more options in terms of people that tech transfer offices can go to prosecute their patents. So it helps in both ways.
Absolutely. Definitely. And given that the fact that the number of patent attorneys is going down and people going to patent law is going down, I think, opening up those opportunities is really great. I also wanted to ask you, you had been in private practice before you headed the USPTO. Talk a little bit about how your experience in private practice helped inform some of the policies you pursued at the PTO, particularly for research institutions and emerging technologies.
To me, it was more about the approach that I took in private practice. And, I'm lucky. I'm at a firm that really, Winston Strawn, that really supports any of the work that I was doing. So whether it was trying to get out there and encourage judges to adopt next gen orders, where they would encourage more junior people to argue, that a lot of those initiatives, it started before me, but I recognized a couple judges had orders, and I thought this is something that we could amplify, we could spread throughout the country. As a result of all of those efforts, the PTAB came up with their own LEAP program. The ITC now has a program, and so for me, it was not just about looking at, hey, what do I need to deliver on to meet the minimum standards for the work that I'm doing? And by minimum, I don't mean not amazing, incredible work product. I mean, if my job is just to deliver briefs and deliver for clients, that's great. I love that work. But I'm always looking at the whole ecosystem. How can we improve it? How can we make it better? And so that was the approach I took in private practice, whether it was many, many years ago at a prior firm working in diversity into the partnership evaluation. What are you doing about this to make sure you're lifting everyone and not just preferring certain people? Working all that into the ecosystem. That was the approach I took when I came to the USPTO. And having done it a number of times, having gotten out there and spoken on what are considered softer topics, like how to be a change agent, I took all of that to the USPTO and said, I'm not going to take anything that's going on in the USPTO for granted. I want to look at all of it. If what we're doing is phenomenal, great, let's double down on it. If there's an opportunity to improve, let's improve. And the way that ties into the work of Autumn, the way it ties into innovators, emerging technology companies, tech transfer offices, is immediately we said, okay, this is a phenomenally important part of our ecosystem. We don't want to just stand back and listen to them as we listen to everyone else. We want to have a lane where we're intentionally working with those offices, where we're figuring out how we can play a role to better support them, where we can make sure that we're advancing policies or not advancing policies. We listen to that as well, that may impact the work that they do and how effective they are. And everything from some of the work that we talked about to just being an advocate for tenure and promotion, to take into consideration patenting. All of those types of initiatives were really focused on how can we be an advocate? How can we play a role in helping, all of these organizations adopt best practices that other ones have adopted, because there's so many best practices out there, so that we're really lifting all of them.
Yeah. And speaking of advocating and lifting everyone, you launched the Council for Inclusive Innovation, also known as CI2, to help address gaps in innovation participation. And it was an incredible document that you and others at the PTO put together. Talk about some of the biggest barriers you identified and how tech transfer professionals can help bridge some of those.
Well, and that's such a timely question, Lisa. Because
yeah, exactly.
So timely. As you know, the Council for Inclusive Innovation appears to have been disbanded. So it was actually started as a result of efforts by Congress, which was bipartisan. It officially launched in the last administration. What we did was we created the first ever National Inclusive Innovation Strategy. And that identified, and I have a copy, I know it's been taken down now from the USPTO's website. If anybody wants it, I have a copy. I'm going to try and find a way to amplify these efforts, even though government is no longer seemingly playing a role in it. But it really identified where the barriers are at every point in the innovation journey, starting with the kids and then moving on up. And with the kids, it also talked about what are we doing? What are best practices? What can we amplify to create more of an innovation economy in the United States? Everything from Camp Invention, where kids just within a week will change their minds from thinking they want to be singers to thinking they want to be engineers. I mean, it was a phenomenal program. So if you look at that document, and I'll find a way to get it reposted, it really did track what the barriers were and what the next steps were. And when I think about how people can get involved, it's more important now more than ever, because government is not playing the role they were before on making sure we're lifting everyone. And it just, and that does happen. It waxes and wanes in terms of what the private sector is interested in and what government's interested in. And it's really now lies with the private sector to think about what we can do together to make sure that we're supporting the innovation economy, including in our schools, including in our libraries across the country. We ended up with over 100 libraries offering great offerings when it came to innovation and entrepreneurship. We went from 1 HBCU to 7. So we now need to band together to think about where are we, take stock of what's going to move forward, what's not, and figure out how the private sector can play the role we were trying to play in government, right? We were trying to identify the holes and make sure that we were filling them. Now that I'm in the private sector, ironically, now the private sector needs to play that role.
Absolutely. And it was an incredible document. I mean, it obviously took you and others at the PTO months to work on it. It was a very well thought out, comprehensive strategy for inclusive innovation. So definitely hope that we can use the private sector and our tech transfer professional friends to help keep that initiative alive and moving forward, because it had some tremendous ideas. So thank you for proposing that.
Well, and thank you, Lisa. I'll take that as a compliment, not to me specifically, but to the incredible people across U.S. government, the working groups. Industry played a major role in that. So I will thank all of them, because it is incredible. There's so much to do. And now it's all documented in one place. And now we just need to move it forward.
Absolutely. Speaking of university tech transfer offices, what role do you think they play in supporting women and underrepresented innovators? And what best practices have you seen in action that actually help move the needle?
So in terms of moving the needle, it's really about making IP relatable to everyone. And, the work that we did with women's entrepreneurship, with the military, with our Black entrepreneurship programs, it's about, and we've used this term over and over again, I feel like at this point it may be overused, is meeting people where they are. And to me, that's not just geographically, it's in terms of hearts and minds, and making people understand how important the ecosystem is. So whether it's programming within the university to have people in the university understand the importance of IP, everything from there on out, and having people, especially within academia, understand that IP is not antithetical to getting your ideas out there into the public. Right. That's something that we've heard from researchers across U.S. government, is they always thought that IP was negative, that it just locked up innovation and wasn't a way of dispersing ideas and getting them to market, that it's really the key to getting them to market, because you need the investment, and it helps you control getting ideas out into the public. You can still get them out. You can still write your papers. You just need to protect it first. So we as an organization, when I was at the USPTO, we worked with other government agencies on that. That work could also happen at tech transfer offices. And I will say, Lisa, I was speaking just the other day. It was ACPC in LA. I was speaking to ACPC in LA, and one woman came up to me and said, "I have to tell you this story." And she said she was speaking to a woman and her organization that was not invited onto design teams. And she said that woman, through our programs, just applied for a US patent. And she said once she applied and everybody knew that she applied, all of a sudden she was invited into design meetings. So sometimes it's the little things, it's the hearts and minds that need to be changed in order to make sure that that everybody's looking at the same way, and that we're all using IP as a democratizer of innovation, because only through democratizing it are we going to realize its best value.
Absolutely. And that's an amazing story. Just like you said, sometimes it's the little things that make all the difference and are the drivers in change. I want to go back and talk a little bit more about AI and some emerging technologies, as well as the future of IP. As you know, AI and machine learning are transforming innovation at incredible speed. How do you think tech transfer offices should be thinking about protecting and licensing their AI-driven inventions?
So first of all, I think they should try and protect anything that they're inventing with AI or in the AI space. We tried to make that clear when we put out the guidance. I know we got some comments from stakeholders that they're all public. Some comments suggesting that because the Federal Circuit standard that we adopted, the PANU test, used the word substantial relationship, that implied some sort of a higher standard, but it didn't. The test for inventorship has not changed. You just need some human contribution, some human inventorship. So you can use AI as much as you want in the process. What you can't do is you can't just send a problem into AI, have AI kick out the answers, and then patent them, right? You need some human contribution. And, I realize as I'm now inventing an AI, just by virtue of the fact that I'm using it extensively to solve problems, there's so many opportunities to provide that contribution, because I never take the first answer to a prompt. I always re-prompt, ask for it to be presented in a different way. I mean, it's just the normal human process. So what I would say is, number one, patent it. Number two, document the human contribution. So if the work I was doing was something that I intended to patent, I would take my whole conversation with AI and I would put that in an electronic lab notebook. I would make sure that at the end of the day, somebody was going to challenge my invention. I could show, look, here's all of my inventive contributions, and you can see my contributions in this. So it's really important to document it, because you don't know what kind of challenges are going to be raised in the future. And then in terms of inventing in the AI stack, continue to invent. I mean, it's a little bit like software in terms of what's patentable, what's not. We don't know where the law on patentability is going to go, right? We know what's happened at the Federal Circuit and in the Supreme Court. We may need legislative action, and we don't know what form that's going to take and how it's going to shape in a way that balances everybody's interests. And so, but what I've always told people is, don't not patent because you think there's a concern now, because the law will change. And so I would just encourage people to avail themselves of the patent system as much as they can, try and follow the USPTO's guidance. And, patenting is going to be critical to getting these ideas to market. So it's important now more than ever, even as technology increases, innovation increases at a faster pace.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think the record keeping is going to be key when it comes to AI inventions, because if you don't do that record keeping now, when that litigation happens, however many years, no one's going to be able to remember, and you're not going to be able to, in all likelihood, trace that information. And, you mentioned about patent law changing. What do you think tech transfer offices and researchers should be watching for on the policy landscape when it comes to IP? I mean, do you think we'll see some movement on subject matter eligibility? That's been one that's been stuck for a very, very long time, over 10 years. Do you think we'll see PARA and other things changing in the near future?
So it's always hard to predict what we're going to see. I know that those are terribly important, and I know everybody has a stake in it. And I think it's a matter of coming up with something that balances all of the interests and make sure that there is widespread support. So I'm hoping that will happen with something around 101. I do think we need more certainty. I do worry to some extent that when it comes to patent eligibility, first of all, diagnostics are my biggest concern, right? We need to make sure that key innovation in certain areas is protectable. And the way the law is being interpreted right now, they're not. So that concerns me. I also, am concerned a little bit on the other side that right now, patent eligibility is really the only early exit in patent litigation when you truly have this kind of trolling behavior where it's not just, NPEs to me, neither good, bad, they're just like everybody else, right? Like sometimes an inventor doesn't start a company, but still needs to enforce their patent. But to me, it's the trolling behavior where somebody's taking patents that don't really read on anybody's technology and just trying to make money that only benefits that person. And so that type of behavior, the only really early exit is around patent eligibility. And that's unfortunate because there's why there are cases that should not have been brought is not about patent eligibility for the most part. It's because they're trying to stretch the patent well beyond what it was covering, or that they've created claims through continuation applications that have nothing to do with the original specification. So that's more non-infringement in 112. So right now the system to me is a little bit broken, and that if we did really focus on the reasons those cases should not have been brought, there would be less attention on patent eligibility, and we could clean up patent eligibility so that it actually works.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, especially on things like 112 and non-infringement and things like that. So given that you're back in private practice now, how do you see your role in helping institutions like universities, startups, and innovators protect and commercialize their IP?
So I'm here to help in a broader way. I will say I am thinking about what I'm going to do outside of my quote unquote job title, which I always think about. And I'm exploring a number of things. Some of them I'll continue with, some of them I'll realize that my time's better spent elsewhere. I do really want to get involved in policy, and that's not a monetizing model for me. That's doing the good work that we did in government. So if there's a chance to file amicus briefs, if there's a chance to, draft letters that go to government that really help move the needle on things that matter. If people want to write letters about what's going on in the administration, I can't write directly, but I can certainly help people draft. I can give them thoughts on strategy, on who to write to. So, I think Autumn and people in the tech transfer area should continue to stay engaged, should not, even if it may be whatever their perceptions are on how effective they can be. To me, it never hurts to ask. It never hurts to weigh in on policy, to figure out how you can move the needle by having a voice.
Yeah, you have to continue speaking out on things that are important, regardless of the political situation. And that really is what Autumn and others need to keep doing as well. So along those same lines, what advice would you give to tech transfer professionals who are looking to strengthen their IP strategy in this ever-changing, ever-evolving legal landscape?
So 2 thoughts. One, I would continue to have a voice in government. I would ask for listening sessions, be front of mind, make sure that you are front of mind with the people who are making the decisions in government. I also think it could be helpful, and I thought about this recently because I was talking to some of our clients who had certain concerns, and I thought, I could do listening sessions in the private sector and invite people in, hear what your concerns are, give you thoughts on how to approach it. So I think just kind of thinking about what are all your levers in terms of making sure that you're heard, thinking about strategy where you can work together, because that's going to be the most effective, and then implementing on that strategy. You got to continue to press to move the needle in a way that supports U.S. innovation. You've got so many of us, like me and many others behind you. I'm sure Derek Brent would love to continue the work on that. And just realizing that you have allies and making sure that we're all continuing to work together.
So along those same lines, Kathi, what trends do you see shaping the future of research commercialization and university industry partnerships?
The trends that I'm seeing right now really relate to what's going on in government, because a lot of the work that goes on in universities is partially funded or, otherwise funded by government resources. So, I think about the Chips and Science Act. We're helping a number of clients with that. We're helping them navigate some of the changes in that. I think about the investments in AI and what's going to become of that, and how's that money going to be spent, and can we make sure that it's spent in universities and that it's spread out so that more people can benefit from it. So I'm working with our government contracts group on really taking a close look at that and making sure that we're all collaborating together to get the word out, to work with individuals. And again, we'd be happy to meet with a larger group if you've got larger groups of people that want to understand what's going on and how working with government has changed and is changing, because now when you work with government, you have additional responsibilities when it comes to DEIA and other things. So to me, those are the trends that we're seeing that are happening pretty rapidly with executive orders and otherwise. So that's to me, that's kind of the macro effect that I'm seeing going on right now. Chips and Science Act, IRA, they were bipartisan. They played a major positive role in the last administration. And I'm not overly political. I hope that they continue to play a role, but we are seeing a lot of changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's tons of changes. And I'm curious, Kathi, what's next for you? You're back at Winston, like we've been talking about. How can listeners stay updated on your work? I mean, I really love the listening sessions. I hope you have some time that you could find to do that. But what else do you have planned to go on for your future?
So first of all, I love that listening session idea. So I do want to get involved on the key policy issues. I also want to, help be a fixer for people. And I'm super excited about the AI work I'm doing right now. I'm doing work in the privacy sector, which is really important, helping companies launch in other areas of the world. I'm still very involved in IP, but more broadly, trademarks and trade secrets and copyrights as well. So I would say stay tuned to my LinkedIn page. I can let folks know what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Feel free to reach out. And then, let's think about it, Lisa. Like maybe it makes sense for me to attend Autumn. And when I go to conferences like that, I should have done it at ACPC. I could host a listening session, and not just me listening, but kind of a sharing session so that we could all talk about things. I could learn what are on people's minds so I can think about how to focus my time, how to focus the time of my colleagues. And it's a good opportunity for others to get together and share ideas on how we can move the needle in a positive way.
Absolutely. Definitely. I think we can find some time for you within Autumn to have you come do one of those listening sessions. So we will definitely work on that. So thank you. And thank you so much, Kathi, for your time today. It's always great catching up with you, and best of luck back in private practice.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Kathi, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Your work, both at the USPTO and now in private practice, has had a profound impact on how we think about intellectual property, innovation, and inclusivity in tech transfer. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Autumn on the Air. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with your colleagues. We'll be back with more conversations about the people and policies driving innovation forward. Until next time, keep innovating.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.